Welcome to Between the Covers, the show for readers and writers and lovers of books. I'm Stephanie, and I'm a publisher at Red Penguin Books, where we publish books of all types and genres. So if you have a manuscript ready to go, a book still stuck in your head, or even 300 sheets of loose leaf shoved in a drawer, and yes, we do get envelopes filled with loose leaf just about every month. Visit us at redpenguinbooks.com and unleash your inner author. I'm so excited today to be joined by three authors who have definitely unleashed themselves. Michael Vecchione is the author of Fallen Angel, a true crime fantasy. Chris Alongi is the author of To Kill a Necromancer. And finally, Jim Webb is the author of Dreamslayers. So we've got a really fun evening planned. First, we're going to meet Michael and the author of Fallen Angel. And our author says, when a priest in the Vatican's Office of Exorcisms in New York noticed the upheaval that was occurring in American cities after perpetrators of particularly heinous and insidious crimes had been acquitted after trial, something struck in him about the dates of those crimes. His research revealed that the crimes all preceded satanic exorcisms he had witnessed or performed and struck at the very fabric of society. After additional research revealed eerily similar instances had occurred around the world, being an exorcist with a thorough knowledge of the devil and his works, the priest concluded that Satan was directly responsible for the crimes and the chaos. In America, the devil had been winning because crimes like those studied by the priest, resulting in criminal trials, were being lost by the prosecution. The reasons for the losses varied from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but a closer examination revealed that the devil had used his wiles to affect the investigations and trials, thus ensuring the desired outcome would be achieved. Once Brooklyn became ground zero for the evil one, a local prosecutor with the skill, personality, strength, and tenacity to take on Satan, to withstand his counterattacks and beat him, was recruited. Michael Gioca, chief of the Rackets Division in the Brooklyn District's Attorney Office, was handpicked by a secret government agency to be that warrior. With crimes that had actually taken place in Brooklyn and investigated and prosecuted by the author as the backdrop, Fallen Angel, a true crime fantasy, is the story of this war with Satan. Please meet author Michael Vecchione. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me, Stephanie.
Oh, thrilled to have you. And I love a true crime fantasy, which is actually true crime. So tell us a little bit about that.
Correct. Well, the genre is a made-up genre. I made it up because it obviously is a combination of two separate genres, one being true crime and the other being kind of novels or fantasy. And I, the idea came about when I had nowhere to take the literally dozens of cases and investigations that I had done over my career in the DA's office in terms of writing about them. People told me, agents told me that people do not buy, people who are fans of true crime don't like short stories. So find a way to wrap all these stories together and then come back and talk to me. So I did. I had this old idea. It's an idea that came about as a result of, unfortunately, a case that I tried but didn't win, and it was against an FBI agent who I had indicted for 4 separate murders. He was on the payroll of the mafia, and he had been tipping the mafia off to informants. They had been killing those informants, and the FBI agent was getting paid for that. And he was. I took him to trial, and during the course of the trial, one of the main witnesses in the case, unbeknownst to me, had given an interview many years before to a reporter, telling the reporter that, well, the FBI agent, what they're saying about him back then was not true. I know the guy, and I know that he's a good guy. Now, the only reason she said that is because the FBI agent had been taking care of her and her husband. Her husband was the main informant. So so that kind of ended the case. My boss, the district attorney, said, you know, you can't go forward. She's not believable, and I had to dismiss the case. Well, I have to tell you, Stephanie, that just bringing the case caused me more trouble in the law enforcement community than you could possibly imagine. People
Shocker.
looked at me as if I was a traitor, and I had to do things like, you know, worry about ex FBI agents going around and looking for dirt on me. There wasn't any to find, but I was concerned that they would plant something or do something that would, you know, ruin my reputation. So as a result of that, a friend of mine who happened to be in the DA's office with me, who was our chief spokesperson, we sat down one day and he said, Mike, you know, we should do something with this whole thing, but let's think about how we can do it. And I said, well, you know, my idea was, this guy is like and I'm going to curse, like the fucking devil. He's just like the devil. He's done things and he's covered them up. And so that kind of spawned an idea for a TV show, not for a book.
Mm.
It sat for years. We never did anything with it. Unfortunately, my buddy died, and I had a time when I needed to have an idea to put all of these crimes together and these stories together. And I looked actually right over to my left. There's a bunch of boxes with my summations and my reports and things that I had when I was in the DA's office. And I saw Fallen Angel written on one of the boxes. And I said, you know what? This may work, you know, but I said, how am I going to sell anybody on the devil being a character and being somebody who would be ruining this prosecutor's life and ruining life in Brooklyn? And there you were, Stephanie. I called you up, and I had written a proposal, and I sent it to you, and you got back to me rather quickly and said, you know what, Mike, not only do I love it, but my editors love it. And now I'm in the midst of writing book 2 of a 3-book series that you and I have contracted for. And it's been terrific. I can't thank you enough, because this really became a labor of love for me in terms of putting an old idea together with all of these cases and coming up with Fallen Angel. And I have to tell you that people who've read the book, they really do like it a lot. So I'm very pleased. I'm very pleased.
Saying, in essence, someone screwed you at work. So not only are you writing a book series, but there might be a TV series to get back at them. I mean, is that kind of what I'm hearing as a through line?
That's kind of what you're hearing. Because,
This is why you don't piss off authors. We'll write you in our books, and
There you go.
I mean, you or
There you go.
the devil or whatever.
That's what I'm hearing, is someone screwed you at work, and now it's a novel and a series. And am I going to watch this on TV next? I mean, this is.
I hope so.
Funny.
The book was
Absolutely, it's a winner. You can tell.
Well, absolutely. The book was optioned actually last week, and the person who is hopefully going to write the series wrote a pilot already, and read it to me. And I have to tell you that when I was listening to it, the hair on the back of my neck was standing up, because he took the idea and he made it even more dark and supernatural. And you know, in my book, as you know, Stephanie, the devil is always is identified by the mole or the mark of the devil on his left cheek. In this pilot, the way that the screenwriter wrote it, the devil has 3 fingers only, and that is as a result, according to him, of some legend that the 2 fingers were chopped off by the good angels before they booted him out of heaven into hell. Now, I had never heard that legend before, but I looked it up, and it is a legend. I can't tell you what people believe it, but I did look it up, and it does exist. So in any event, that's how the devil is going to be designated. Should we be lucky enough to get this on television? So
fantastic. Now,
Fantastic.
That's got to be tough to do a law enforcement oriented show in the age of, we really need to change how we do the police and law enforcement these days, and the Black Lives Matter movement. How is that, like, how do you reconcile those two things?
I don't. It has nothing to do with it. Absolutely nothing to do with it. The cases, the trials, and the investigations that I did had nothing to do with race. Had nothing to do with. The only thing they had to do with was bad guys and bad women committing crimes. That's it. And there were no racially motivated murders. The 4 cases in the first book were all, they weren't similar races on similar races in every one of them, but in one, a police officer was killed, and he was killed by someone of his own race, and in the last story, it was a person killing a young woman, same race. So race had nothing to do with it, and it's I was a prosecutor for 40 years, and I can tell you that without hesitating, that I never made a decision in any case, in any investigation, based on anything but the facts and what was happening. And race had nothing to do with any of them. So,
Michael, how did it feel as an author reading the screenplay? Like somebody else took Fallen Angel for this pilot. Did it feel weird seeing someone else's take on it? Or were you kind of like, wow, Three-Fingered Devil, I never thought of that. How did it feel to read your own stuff?
it felt great, to tell you the truth, because it told me that what I had written was not just some pap that someone would just simply say, this has been done before. Someone actually took it and transformed it into, I'm a big TV watcher, and I watch lots of series, and I could, as he was talking, he actually read it to me, Stephanie. I didn't read it. He read it to me, actually. And as he was reading it to me, I was picturing what it would look like on my big screen TV right behind me. And it was rather exhilarating, I have to tell you. It was really a fun thing. And the screenwriter is not someone who just, picked this up and has done this for the first time. He's been involved in writing for TV for many years, and he also has been writing some things that are on the, in the supernatural, as in that genre. So he kind of melded both. And last but not least, he's a Brooklyn guy. He comes from Brooklyn, so he knows exactly the streets. He said, this is great because, you were writing about certain places where these crimes were taking place. He said, I knew where every one of them was, and that allowed him to, to write almost as if he was there, with me when I was doing these cases. So it really was wonderful.
I'm picturing the tour next, like one of those double-decker buses they run around New York with the
yeah, that's definitely coming up. Yeah.
Guys, I have it right in my drawer over here, an idea that my friend, Jerry and I came up with, where we were going to do a mafia tour with, he had a friend who was in the tour business, and we were going to do a mafia tour to places in New York,
about that,
5 boroughs where certain important and notorious events have taken place, and we actually did a run through for these people, and it just never got off the ground. Unfortunately, the person who owned the tour company, who was interested in it, passed away, and the wife was not involved any longer, so it kind of fell by the wayside. So.
I went on a
Sounds like you need to hitch up with De Niro and Pesci and sort of, make them an offer they can't refuse, sort of thing.
Yeah, well,
Gino too, maybe.
There are lots of social clubs and lots of places where things have occurred in New York in terms of the mafia that are true, as opposed to things like, what happened in The Godfather or that. So and there's a story attached to every one of the places, and the story, and I have it. I've written them all. So So your idea of a fallen angel tour is actually a very good one, Stephanie.
Well,
So
I know in New York they have like the Seinfeld tour and they have the Sex and the City tour. I went on
Yeah.
the Jack the Ripper tour in London years ago.
Oh man, that's just super creepy.
It
Yeah.
was very creepy. It was
Yeah.
Gosh.
I did one in Chicago called the Untouchables tour. I went on that, and
wow.
you know, where the Valentine's Day massacre was, and all and things. And you know where we wound up? We wound up on a street, and there was a big building on the left side as we were coming into the parking garage where the bus was dropping us off, and they stopped. And these guys who were the tour guide said, and over there, and they pointed to their right. That building is the most important and most powerful person in Chicago actually runs it. Now, we had been talking about mafia people, right? All during, and he said, that's where Oprah Winfrey's studio is. Right? So that's how the
He's not
tour
wrong.
Yeah.
Song is right. Absolutely. Well,
Absolutely.
so Fallen Angel, read the book. Next thing you know, you'll be watching the TV show, and then you'll come to New York to take the bus tour.
Yep.
Gosh, you know, as a history nut, I'm like, that sounds really
Brilliant.
cool, but like also that sounds very macabre.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of macabre, Chris, our next
Okay.
author, Chris Alongi, is the author of To Kill a Necromancer. And our author writes, in a world of greed, gods, and monsters, paladins are chosen to do what no mortal human can. Granted divine attributes of their chosen deity, they protect the broken fragments of human civilization from any and all threats, often from necromancers, those born with the ability to speak with and raise the dead. Such a power inevitably corrupts and turns each and every necromancer evil, right? Janua has just received her first assignment as a paladin, to execute a necromancer terrorizing a small town with an undead army. But what should be a straightforward mission turns complicated when another necromancer reveals himself as an ally, flying in the face of everything Janua's ever heard about his kind. Can she trust him to help her on her quest, or is he an even greater threat? Please meet our next author, Chris Alongi. So you thought that Fallen Angel was creepy?
Well, this sounds great, Chris. You want to get together and we can make a book, The Fallen Angel and the Necromancers? How about
That's a perfect segue.
I know, right?
Works spot on.
I love this. So, my goodness, I know that Michael's book was inspired because, well, he was screwed at work. But tell us, what on earth inspired this?
Diablo 2, the video game. It's so first of all, this is a novella series. To Kill a Necromancer is book 1. It comes out this month. My God. And then I know, I was like, oh my God. And then I got 4 more coming out this year, and then I'm going to load up the next 5 for the next year. But yeah, last year I got COVID. And for me, luckily, it was just like a cold, but I'm quarantining in my apartment, and my brother and I grew up with this video game, Diablo 2, which recently got remastered. And it's a very classic, you choose a class like an Amazon, a assassin, a druid, a barbarian, a paladin, or a necromancer, and you fight Diablo's forces of evil, and you save the world basically. And we were playing it together online, and I was playing an Amazon archer, and he was playing a druid, someone who can like conjure or turn into animals. And I thought, wouldn't it be funny if the paladin and the necromancer had to work together to save the world? Because they have such totally different powers and such totally different personalities in this game. And then 30 pages of notes of world building and characters later, where I just kind of blacked out and was just writing it all down. And I realized probably just write this. So it came from a video game. I'm also a Dungeons and Dragons player, so there's like inspiration from that. The world itself is largely inspired by ancient Greek and Roman mythology.
Cool.
There's a whole pantheon of gods. Janua's god, the one who gives her powers, is the king of the gods, and he's a fire deity. So she has a lot of like fiery powers, can have moments of super strength, super speed, healing, that type of thing. But there are other gods who their paladins have very different powers that we meet throughout the course of this series. So there's a standard war god, who has like stone skin, like you're not getting a sword through that. Healing deities, fertility deities, and it's just really fun to explore that as Janua, this brand new paladin who's kind of new to this world, is following this trail to a bigger and more evil threat next to a person that she has been taught all of her life. These people are evil, they are corrupt, it's inevitable, so kill on sight. But she has to work with this guy, and as she's realizing like, oh, these things that I've been taught, they're not necessarily true. Like, yeah, there are some evil necromancers, but that's true of all people. Like, and so she's deconstructing all of these lies and deconstructing, okay, why does everyone hate these people? Why are we making them the scapegoat? What's going on? And by the end of the series, she basically has to choose between her god and what she's followed all of her life, and her morals that she has rediscovered over the course of this story.
Now, does that mean that you actually know what's going to happen in this entire series? Because you just kind of described 4 more books.
I have
5 next year.
Yeah, I've got like the next 3 are written and ready to go. Basically, the 5th one is like 3/4 of the way done, and then like the rest of the series that I have like the broad strokes of this character is going to live, this character is going to die, this is what it's all leading up to and accumulating towards. Let's see how long it takes to get there.
Fantastic.
Hey, Chris,
Totally
Chris, I have a
relate to
question
that.
for you.
What's
Where do you have all of this? Do you have all of that laid out somewhere in a notebook or online? Or because I find that even in writing, by the time I get to the middle or even the end of one of my parts of one of my books, I have forgotten what has happened in the beginning in terms of
Oh yeah,
names
you're not alone
names
there.
I've given people. So how do you keep that straight in your mind, or what do you do?
So we probably heard planner versus pantser in the writing community. Planners being the people who outline stories and plan everything ahead of time before writing, and then the pantsers who fly by the seat of their pants and just make it up as they go along. And then everyone in between. I know my mother is an author too, she's a pantser, but I'm a planner and I don't know how to feel about that.
I think life's easier if you're a planner.
Anyway.
I'm Dr. Chaos.
Okay, so Chris, you're a planner, and Jim, you're a pantser. I
have plotted a little bit with some of my books, but most of all it's by the seat of my
And Michael, I forgot what I was even writing about. Is that what I'm hearing?
What? Say it again, Steph. I'm sorry. I didn't hear
and Michael is I forgot what I was even writing about. Is that like a pantser?
Yeah. What's the name
Michael
for that?
Plans. Michael plans and then forgets. For this series, I've gotten like each story, like the main conflict is on like note cards. I like to visually see that, and then I've got like all the world building notes and characters and notes on each character's personal arc, and what they're going to go through is all in a Word document that I keep in that folder that has
I got you. Okay.
all that stuff. So it's a little somewhat organized, but it's loose enough that if I decide to change my plan about halfway through, which has been known to happen, it's relatively easy for me to do that.
Well, let me ask you a question. I don't know if you can see this. Does this make me a planner? These little notes.
Absolutely.
And you know when I wrote this,
like, it's kind of
I woke up in the middle of the night and had this pad, and I just simply noted this because I had an idea that I needed.
The best ideas come.
Yep. And the shower and in the middle of the night. Those
Yeah.
and at work.
Driving too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, driving's really good. That's really good.
I used to do that when I was summing up and writing summations. When I was trying cases, I'd stop. I'd have my car and I'd have my phone in the car, and I would just turn it on and talk in the car while I was driving home, and then I would get home and put it into more cohesive form. So
Oh, I've seen some people who they'll be on the show with me, and behind them are whiteboards and color-coded Post-it notes
Oh,
and
yes.
charts and
I
graphs
can't.
and books.
Nah, you can't do
That's
that.
like way over on the planner side. That is like beyond planning for me. That
If
is
I
like,
write notes, I can't. I lose them, and if I find them, I can't read my writing. I might as well be in Arabic. So it's a
It's happened
complete.
to
So I
me
just
too.
don't write notes.
I
Well,
love
at 3
that.
o'clock at 3 o'clock in the morning, Jim, it's very difficult sometimes to read someone's handwriting when you're finally awake. That's what I
Wow.
have.
I'm very lucky in that most of my storytelling ideas comes to me when I'm at my day job, which is at an Italian deli. Yeah, and we have a bunch of it's run by a friend. I lost my job over the pandemic, and then when my unemployment ran out, he was like, hey, I really need an extra help at the deli, and I was like, I can do that. And it's been really great, and basically we have all these notepads, like, of those really crappy thin paper.
Yeah.
And so we just have thousands of those notepads all over the place to take down orders. And
But doesn't that get difficult if you pick up the wrong notepad and someone's ordered, like, salami or something, and you've got, like, murder happening down the street? That's a little bit. Would they get upset, like the punter, the customer?
yeah. It has been known for, like, usually it's a coworker. Every now and then it's a customer where they'll see me jotting something down when I'm not talking to anybody, and it'll be like, kill off this character here for doing such and such, and so they'll be like, what you writing there, Chris? And I'm like, it's a story idea, it's fine. So
I found the note section of my iPhone is really a good place.
I use that a lot.
I can't do that. I'll write it down on my cell phone, and then I'll forget about it, and I'll never.
Oh
see
no,
it.
I love that note thing on the iPhone.
Yeah,
I do, because I can actually read that, which helps.
Yes.
Yeah, I need like the physical notes, because I stick it in my pocket, and then at the end of the day, after I've forgotten whatever it is that I've written down, I'll be, there it is, and put that in my laptop with its proper document in its proper folder, and then I can actually reference it later properly. But yeah, no, it's a little bit chaotic, but for the most part, it's
Sounds pretty organized to me.
Yeah, it does to me
I can
too.
find a thing that I need to find, and that's all I need. Compared to some of the other members of my family, I am the disorganized, sloppy mess. So maybe I'm a little skewed, but that's how it is for me.
Chris, you were inspired by a video game, but have you done the flip side? I know I had another author on who was inspired by a video game, and then the book also, he used that as a script in a video game so that they can actually play the book.
No, that's
when you play, are you scripted like that? It was some sort of a game or D&D that they could actually use his book as the script to see where things went. Is that
Sounds great, but that sounds terrific.
That does sound cool. I'm a newbie writer, so nothing of mine has inspired a video game yet. But I will say,
plenty of time.
I know, but I will say I have used some couple of stories and novels of mine for Dungeons and Dragons campaigns.
Okay.
I was, the dungeon master for the first time ever. I've been the long time player, but never the DM until about a year ago, and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll DM. And
it's so great that people still do that. I used to do that in the 70s, and we were always drunk, and I remember getting killed by a frog once. I mean, who gets killed by a frog? I can't remember who I was, but, like,
Perfect. That's a D&D campaign. If you're not rolling to seduce the dragon or getting killed by a frog, you're not playing D&D.
Yeah. I was traumatized by that for years. Killed by a frog,
But yeah, no, for the most part, it was an original setting, but I ended up using characters from a series that I have since been put way on the back burner. Have not revisited that for a while, as well as characters from my novel Citadel, which is a science fiction book that comes out in June from Blackstone Publishing.
Ooh.
And basically they're spending most of their time in, like, with the characters of the first book, and then there's this one island that was all populated by characters from Citadel, and it just made my life so much easier, because we're pretty heavily, the chaos of D&D. where you can plan everything in advance, but the characters are going to think of something and it's going to throw the whole thing off the rails. So you really got to think on your feet of like, how would these characters, how would my BBEG react to this? And it was just so much easier because I knew all of these characters. I'd written entire books with them. And it was just really fun to see, okay, how would these sci-fi characters operate in this D&D fantasy setting? Well, this guy who really wants to be a medic would, of course, be a cleric. This scientist girl would be an alchemist archer. Like, it was just really fun, and it really gave me a deeper understanding of these characters, too, which was a nice little bonus.
It's great. It's great.
It's brilliant. Yeah, that was
Well,
great.
you know, when I have to write dialogue for either a cop or a bad guy, it's not that difficult for me because I've run into so many of them during the course of you know, I find myself sometimes having to, hold back because some guys or gals, talk in a way that I think that would maybe one of Stephanie's editors might burn his or her ears. So I have to hold back a little bit, but it's a lot. It's much more of an advantage when you have been in the world that you're writing about. Then you can't imagine how difficult it must be for you, Chris, because obviously you're not in that fantasy world. I was in this world, so and I'm just making a fantasy out of it. It's so so it's I admire you for that. That's really terrific.
Well, and I do struggle a bit with it. I've had issues where, like, apparently I can be too good at writing dialogue where the characters will speak in a really realistic, relatable, easy to read way for a 21st century millennial. But it doesn't really translate particularly well when they're in a fantasy world that's supposed to be based on ancient Greece and Rome.
Oh yeah,
so
absolutely.
I
kind of do that with my stuff. That I switch to a sort of more realistic dialogue, but I set in a medieval, if you like, world. But it kind of works. I think it works.
Yeah, I mean it can, but like, my first draft will be like very Gen Z millennial lingo, and then I'll go back through the revisions and like regress the language a little bit. It's still fantasy, so I can get away with a lot.
And fortunately, none of us were actually there to hear what they sounded like.
Yeah, exactly.
I know, right?
You can't be wrong. You can't be wrong.
Exactly. I can have a lot of fun with that. That's why I really like epic fantasy and science fiction, because I can base it off of any historical society that I like, but at the end of the day, I get to decide what I'm keeping, what I'm throwing out, what I'm using. Greece and Rome, with the exception of Sparta, they were horribly misogynistic. But in this world, there is no misogyny because I don't like it. And for once, like Citadel, the sci-fi novel, that is a patriarchal society. Absolutely. That is, I am explicitly talking about, here is all the ways sexism sucks. But with this novella series and To Kill a Necromancer, I just wanted a break. Like, give me one world where it doesn't matter, where a woman can just beat her way through the Paladin Academy, come out on top, and nobody raises an eyebrow at that.
There you go.
Love that. Well, if you were inspired by video games and Michael by work, I am anxious to hear what Jim was inspired by in Dreamslayers, a Legends of Ansu fantasy. And our author writes, Araline Cage's rage knows no bounds. Quick to feed enemies to her pet panthers, the wealthy spy master's daughter is appalled when fools call for the destruction of her missing father's land and the deaths of their people. So, when her parent reappears, the arrogant assassin whisks him away from the impending carnage to plan their bloody revenge. Gunjun, the Slayer's options are rapidly shrinking. On the run after offing the vile emperor that hired him, the killers on his trail leave little room for rest. And with his hopes of an easy retirement now well out of reach, he has no qualms about accepting a bounty for the infamous spy master's decapitation. Escaping into neutral territory with her father in tow, Araline is incensed when they are double-crossed and given up to a powerful sorcerer. And the closer Gunjun draws to his quarry, the more he wonders if he's on the side of good or evil. As fate dooms the two to fight blade to blade, will either emerge unscathed? Dreamslayers is the action-packed first book in the Slayer epic fantasy series. If you like sharp-tongued characters, gritty landscapes, and pure vengeance, you'll love J.W. Webb's whirlwind, grimdark tale. I'm so excited to welcome author J.W. Webb. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Stephanie. It's lovely to be here.
Oh, absolutely. And the first in this epic series. How many are in the series and are they out yet?
It's slightly convoluted. Yeah, it's actually it's actually the 13th book I've written.
Okay.
And my world is called Ansu, which is basically ANSU, which someone said was an anagram of anus, which really kind of made me get very drunk one night to get over that. But that wasn't intentional.
Come on.
Yeah, you know, there's always that guy out there, isn't there? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, there is.
Anyway,
You should have used the acronym for asshole.
You know, it's too late. It's too late. I can't change it now. It's about 20 years ago. So I came up with this idea and I pulled outside a pub. I used to be a trucker in Britain and I went out a few beers and I used to sit and watch people. It was always fascinating watching people. And I got this concept of this character. And I was a big Tolkien fan, huge on Tolkien. It was before Harry Potter and that. It was like various fancy big writers. I was into the whole epic fantasy sort of thing. And that was my passion. And so I came up with this character. He had a big sword, and he was walking to a pub, and then there was a fight, and that was the plot, if you like. That was it. There was no world. There was a few bad guys, and then this Viking dude turned up, and then this feisty female turned up, and she beat everybody else up. And then I had 3 characters, and it went from there to now we're at 13 books and about 4,000 characters, and I forget, like Michael, I forget who most of them are. You know, I don't recognize them. They torture me. But
you started more secure than I did. I'll like start with a vague aesthetic and maybe a character and maybe a theme, and that's about it. That's all I got to work with.
Well, mine was years of abuse, really, and self-abuse, and just traveling the world. I was in the Queen's Guards. I did all sorts of things. I hitchhiked from Alaska to Key West. I've done some crazy stuff, but it all feeds the imagination. But Dreamslayers, the book, the reason I sort of market it as a book one is it is indeed it's a spin-off from my last trilogy, which was the Berserker trilogy, which was kind of a take on Norse myth, which I really enjoyed, and it got some pretty good reviews. And that led me to one of the worst characters in it, Gudjon. He's kind of like an Oriental assassin type. I mean, very lethal. I used to do kung fu, so I like all that leaping about. And anyway, he survived. He's one of the few survivors from the Berserker trilogy. And then I brought in this new character who's, I think, is one of my best characters, Araline Kays, and she's lethal and she's arrogant, but you can't help but love her. She's all about protecting her father, protecting her family. And then you've got this other dude that is just about earning coin. But the thing that happens through Dreamslayers is he starts to realize that, yeah, I'm a bad guy, but actually I'm not as bad as some of these people, you know. So you get to like him more because in the Berserker trilogy, he's a key villain and you don't like him. But in this, you get to think, actually, this guy's got something about him. And taking to what Michael said about, you know, some of the guys that everybody's complicated. It's not this shades of gray, if you like. And so he starts to develop as more than just a thug assassin. And she, you know where she's coming from, but she's kind of, you know, she's so tight and highly strung. But fate forces them together so that although they're mortal enemies, and they stay antagonistic, because I like a lot of that in my books, but the real bad guys come from without, you know. So it's part of the series. It's very much part of the series, but I do market it as a standalone. Or 1 or 2 reviewers have said it helps to read the Berserker trilogy before for the world building, because I do tend to go a bit nuts on my world building. But and I think that's probably that probably is a fair point. But I like to think it reads pretty well as a standalone. I was very ill last year, and I lost a lot of pace, but I managed to catch up with the first drafts of the next 2 books, which I'm planning to release this fall, which will complete this trilogy with Gudrun and Araleen, although I've got a second trilogy with them planned for a few years' time. Before that, I'm going back in another direction, but I won't go into that because it's like, but
you know, it's funny, you mentioned that there's like, after 12 books, there's like 4,000 characters. Have you ever had a fan or a reader say something to you about a character? And you really kind of stood there like, who are they talking about? Has that ever happened?
I mean,
you said 4,000 characters. That's a lot of characters.
Fortunately, well, that's a bit of exaggeration, but there's a lot. Fortunately, the people that one of my characters is in a 6-book series, and he was basically the guy that was going to the pub with a big sword, Corin, and he's like a Celtic warrior. A lot of my stuff is sourced by Celtic and Norse myth, and the Mabinogi, the Welsh myth. I mean, I love all that stuff. And he had quite a bit of a fan base. People liked him, or they hated him. You know, it's just a drunken toe rag and thug, really. But he had a good heart, you know, and that's really, and he develops into something beyond. But fortunately, yeah, people that pulled up characters, they were usually ones I could remember. Thank goodness, because if they pulled up some little minor guy who I bumped off in a pub somewhere, or you know, then I would say.
Well, it sounds like you really like to play with good and evil. Like you thought they were good, but not so much. Or you thought they were a bad guy, but maybe they've got some good points about them. You know, you like to live in the gray area, I'm hearing.
Oh, very much so. Very much so. And even my gods, I have I create a pantheon of gods, but they're based on whatever, really. I mean, you could say they're based on Tolkien, but they're also based on probably Greek, Roman, probably Norse, Indian. It's it's kind of my mindset would probably put them as sort of Western, but they all hate each other, and they're all, you know, trying to outdo each other, and the head of the gods, it's kind of like a Zeus and Hera in some ways, in that they're brother and sister, they're husband and wife, and they can't stand each other, and there's all this. So the gods are basically, you know, and they mistreat the mortals, and there's this continual game going on, which actually links all my books because they're set in 3 different time zones. Like some of them are set my prequel, which was Goal, which was one specific book, which I'm adding another 2 books to. That was set 1,000 years before the Corin books. And again, Dreamslayers is 1,000 years after that. So it covers 2 years. So it's a lot of chaos in that time.
What could possibly happen in 2,000 years?
Exactly.
I mean, it's like, well, the Egyptians, the rise and fall of the Romans, the
ain't nothing good.
medieval time period, the Renaissance, the colonization, imperialization of the New World, and all the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Lots of things. Lots of things.
Wow. I mean, you really take the word epic fantasy series and you run with it, man. This is epic.
I always tell people it's an affliction. Yeah, I must have been dropped on my head when I was young. You know.
And we all were.
Yeah.
Hey, Jim, do you have in mind a locale? I mean, is it an English locale? Is it England? Is it Iceland? Is it Norway? I mean, what do you have that in your head when you write this?
It started off, I would say, probably roughly England, but it went on to be Europe, a Middle Age period, Dark Ages. I would say Dark Ages, Celtic. Okay. But it's since gone into the far north. And lately I've gone east, and I've also gone south. So I've sort of made it. In my early books, probably a lot of my characters were you token like with Tolkien, the sort of token characters that you, although they were 3-dimensional, they were more standard fantasy. But as I've gone on, I've pulled from all different parts of the world, really, and right. Tried to bring in more sort of variety from that way. So originally it was drawn from Celtic, Norse, loosely. I mean, my hero, there was Danish-American author called Paul Anderson, who wrote mostly science fiction. And to be honest, I never read any of his science fiction because I just struggle with science fiction. But he wrote a book, and it's as old as Lord of the Rings, called The Broken Sword, which told about the horrendous war between the trolls and the elves. And it's a very small book, but it is just one of the most incredible books. It's incredibly brutal, but it's all about the realm of fairy, not to be mistaken with little fairies. The realm of fairy is extremely dark and sinister.
No, or Seelie and Unseelie, that type
Exactly.
of
Yeah, exactly. And anyway, that was a brilliant book, but that was a huge influence for me, as was, as I said, The Lord of the Rings. And when J.R. Martin wrote Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones, I really realized that this is where I'm at. I've got to, and getting back to a point that Chris made, I've got to make my characters more gritty, more realistic. So I came to 21st century characters, if you like, set in a Dark Age backdrop with the world building. So I like to keep the myth and magic and surrealism there.
Gotcha.
But I have the gritty characters that they cuss a hell of a lot. And most of them are bad. Even the good ones are bad, you know.
No,
they're really bad.
The first line of Citadel, in the prologue, where I kill off the main character's boyfriend, is of course, the first time Elias went into the flooded forest, it all went to shit.
Perfect.
That's a way to start a book. That's
hey Jim, you have to obviously conjure up and make up this, what you're the setting and what's going to come after one thing after the other. One advantage that I have is that my book is set in Brooklyn, and all of this stuff that you're talking about actually happens in Brooklyn in terms of different. I mean, you can't believe, sometimes when I used to ride homicide duty, and I did for a long time, where I would go out, people were committing crimes, I mean, the most horrific crimes you could imagine, and I would go to the scenes or go to the police station, et cetera, to take statements. Sometimes I would go home and I'd, and as I laid my head on the pillow, say, no one would believe that this stuff happens in the real world, and it does. And man's inhumanity to his fellow man is you can't conjure that up. It's there. You couldn't get that bad. And I've used that line in several of my summations, when I was summing up, that you can't imagine how that someone actually did this to another person. And so I guess that's an advantage, that I don't have to think about whether it's Norway, England, or whatever. I got to think about whether it's Coney Island or Brighton Beach or or Greenpoint or that kind of thing, another part of Brooklyn, because every one of them is almost like a different, as you said, locale in Brooklyn, and the people who live in the southern end of Brooklyn are different than the people who live in the northern end of Brooklyn, and it's so I guess I don't have to think as much as you do in terms of.
No, I think that's
live experience. As you can see, I don't have that, so I have to research.
Yeah,
I think that's a really valid and relevant point, and I would answer that by saying, that my characters are exactly like your character. They're drawn from reality. It's set fantasy trope, events, very much a mythic background, Tolkien-esque, if you like. But the characters, they are very gritty. They are very down to earth. They're people that I was a truck driver for 20 years. I was in the Queen's Guards, construction. I know people. We know people. So
exactly. I would say that probably 95% of the characters that I have in my book are actually based on real people, or I just changed the name around a little bit, and they are real people. But obviously not the character who is the main character is based on a real person, and but there are people in there like detectives that I use in the cases. Change their names, but
change the name as long as you change the name.
Their quirks are all actually things that I've witnessed and saw and how they operated. So,
there's a fantasy writer I really loved back in the 80s called David Gemmell, and people have said that my work can be similar to his, which is a huge compliment. But he famously was a real character. He famously based all his characters from his first book, who he didn't like. Well, the book was called Legend. It was a great book, from people that worked in his local press station. It was called, I can't think of the word. Anyway, and it was a Hastings Observer, so I thought you'd like that, Chris. And in Sussex, and he apparently, yeah, he secretly wrote this thing, and he had them all based on them, and you know, he bumped off the ones he didn't. I thought it was just brilliant.
It's a good way to get back to people.
Yeah, like don't piss off writers.
Quite.
I'm an introvert who's just really good at pretending to be an extrovert, so I don't know a whole lot of people. But a lot of times I'll find it's easier when I'm writing all these characters, aspects or certain pieces of my friends, my families, myself will wind up in a lot of these characters. Like Janua, some of her journey is an exaggeration of mine and some of my friends' journey. Especially since that novella series in To Kill a Necromancer, almost every single major character in there is queer. It's a queer fantasy story. And hi. And it is kind of like realizing not just how the actually works around you, not and seeing it for yourself rather than being told, but also figuring out your own truth and realizing kind of who you are and the power that you get from that, but also the wide variety of reactions that you
get absolutely.
From the very positive to the totally indifferent to the absolutely nightmarish negative. And it's like,
well, that's the world of the reviewer, isn't it? I mean, boy, oh boy, you get some interesting people on. You really do.
Sure. Well, we have a whole lot of experience here. Jim, how many books? You said 12 books you've written?
Dreamslayers is number 13. And there'll be 2 more. If you include the box sets and the audiobooks, it's a lot, but it's
a lot of books.
So 15 at the end of the year.
How many books? You have some other books out also, don't you, Chris?
Under this name, C.M. Alongi, not yet, actually.
Okay, but under other names.
Yeah, short stories and novellas mostly.
Okay.
And then at the end of this year, it's going to be Citadel is the only novel, and then the first 5 novellas.
Terrific. And Michael, this is your 4th or 5th?
I'm writing number 6 right now, and I have 3 short stories that.
We lost your audio.
Yeah, just for a second. Yeah.
We heard we got your short stories.
Lot of experience here. What would you say to an aspiring writer, Jim, with all that experience? Someone's just starting out. I'm sure you get people all the time who say, I want to write. What do I do?
I think encouragement. I always say that people stick at it. I mean, it's not easy, but I will say one thing. I get so many comments from people, writers groups and things like, how many words have you written? What do you do? What have you got your routine? What time do you get up in the morning? Do you beat your cat before you write? All sorts. I'm like, look, don't pin me down here. I'm a storyteller, really, and I learned to write. I never used a computer before I was 40. I'm as blue collar as you can be, if you like. I learned to write because I needed to get these stories out. So I don't stick to a set thing. But I think the key point to say to anyone starting out is, it's not going to be easy, but you can do this and you will do it and stick at it and you'll be great. And it's perseverance, and anything worth doing is never easy, but you'll get there.
Absolutely. Kind of like the Nike logo, just do it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Chris, how about you? Some advice for a young writer?
Younger.
Young or inexperienced. It could be an old writer. I won't say age.
There we go.
A new writer.
There you go. I would say, write what you want to read, because you are going to read it and reread it and reread it over and over and over again. And also, every now and then I have, friends or inexperienced or newbie people who are interested in this field, and they say, I have this idea, but I don't know if anyone else would be interested in it. It's like, There absolutely would be, because there are
Oh,
7
yeah,
billion
yeah,
people on this
yeah,
planet. If even
yeah.
1% enjoys it, that's still going to be like 700 million people. there are going to be people who want it. It's, you really just gotta, keep going. As you said, it's going to be rough. You're going to get rejected by agents and by editors and publishers. There are going to be bad reviewers and people who don't like it, but there are going to be people who do like it. And at the end of the day, getting published, it's more about marketing than writing skill, as proven by 50 Shades of Grey.
Absolutely.
It is. And you're absolutely right.
going.
You've got to write what you love. You've got to love what you do.
Yes.
If you don't love what you do, no one else is going to.
Exactly. No one's going to
Passion
love
has
your
to be there.
no one's going to love your story the way that you do.
Exactly. No, you're right about that. Michael, some advice for newbie writers?
Well, I guess I consider myself a newbie writer. I mean, I spent most of my time trying cases and investigating cases. This is all new to me, but the idea of storing up your experience and then sitting down, and if it's like Jim with a pad and pen, or like us with, in front of a computer, just bang it out. Just those experiences, just bang them out. And then when you actually see it, you can then take it and craft it and shape it and do, what you think will be. First of all, I agree with Chris. Do it for yourself, but I think that don't just kind of not take your experience and use what you've experienced and put it into the idea that you have in your head in terms of writing it. You'd be surprised how things fit if you do it, sit down and do it properly. You might have an idea to write a book like I did about crimes. And it turns out when I sat down and did it, I got this idea of, having the devil being the ultimate criminal, that kind of thing. That was really what we thought of back then. And it didn't come from anything other than, my experience. And so I would say, don't just, just fluff away your experience and say, well, no one will care about that. If you are doing it, sit down and put it down on paper and I think, or on a computer screen and look at it, it'll come out okay. So just don't give up.
What is a notepad?
I love that there's more than one way to get this stuff down. The phone,
Exactly.
paper, whatever.
Chris, here's a notepad.
There we go. There we go. Well, we've got some fabulous books here, and I hear many more to come. So let's just go out and get started, because I hear each of these has some sequels coming. Fallen Angel, a true crime fantasy by Michael Vecchione. And we have To Kill a Necromancer by C.M. Alongi. The first, and I think there's going to be at least, I heard, 4 more this year, 5 next year. You better start reading now.
They're novellas. They're short. Don't worry.
And then Dreamslayers by J.W. Webb. And this is also a series. Again, get those first books now so you can get in on the whole thing. And for the 3 of you, you've been awesome. I can't wait to get everybody out there reading your books. So thanks for joining us. And please
thank you very much.
When the next one.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you for having it. And
Thank
nice
you
to
for
meet
having
you
us.
guys.
Yeah, I gotta add a
nice to
couple
meet
of
you
books
guys.
to my wish list.
Absolutely.